Hey everybody, the Miser here again for another video. Today I'm going to add to my general series with a fifth video about subordinate city generals. Subordinate cities are these additional cities that are NPC controlled that you can obtain after about, level 15? I don't know, that was a long time ago. But you get your first one and it pops up over here to the left of your in-city. After that, depending on your prestige, your rank, and your VIP and a bunch of other factors, you can start to collect subordinate cities out in the open world. And there's all kinds of different types. If you want to learn more about the types, I recommend that you read some of the online FAQs or anything like that, or really you can just go around and click on them. And when you click on them, they'll have a couple different things. They produce different materials, not a big deal. They produce gold and stuff too. That's not all that huge either. What really matters are these subordinate city buffs that you get. So choosing your proper subordinate cities is also essential. But for example, I have a couple Russias because I have better defensive attack. So my in-city troop attack is increased by these guys. And the rest of it isn't. Like traps don't really matter, and these are not really that important. I really care about that first buff. So Japan's and Russia's are higher demand. China's great for resource gathering and so on. And obviously the quality has an effect as well. But other than the actual buff that they give, they provide some other functionality that is essential to PvP combat. And where that comes into play are the mayors of the city. So when I assign a mayor to my subordinate city, if it's done correctly, my mayor can provide a debuff against enemy troops. So that means if my subordinate cities are active and somebody attacks me, or if I attack somebody else and I include my subordinate cities, then my mayors from all these subordinate cities will apply their debuff to enemy troops. And I'm going to talk about this in detail because I find that subordinate cities is an area where people have some misunderstandings of how they actually function. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is really what they are used for. So what are they used for? Primarily they're used for debuffing enemy troops. So it's very important to make this distinction here. All these generals have different buffs. So for example, if we look at this guy, Mehmed II, if we look at his unique skill, he increases ranged troop attack by 15% and he reduces enemy mounted troops and ground troop defense by 15%. If I put him on my subordinate city, the only part of this skill that will actually be applied in combat is the reduction of enemy mounted troops and ground troop defense. And I say that it's the only one that gets applied. That's not technically correct. Technically, ranged troops attack by 15% does get applied as well, but it only gets applied to the subordinate city troops themselves. So if you look in subordinate cities, you'll find that their amount of troops, because you use them so often, is really negligible. So if I put this guy on as my mayor, then I'm giving 15% range buff to 8,000 tier 9 Imperial crossbowmen, these guys. That's not that great. But the debuff that he can provide will impact my enemy who's attacking me or who I'm attacking, and it'll reduce their troop defense or attack or HP, depending on what you're using, by a percentage. That is, when it adds up to be quite significant. So that's their primary use. What does it look like in PvP? Well, in PvP, if I look at some logs, I'll show you what this looks like. Let's look at something that is... Okay, here's an example. So here's a defense. So everybody has their unique stats depending on what monarch gear you're wearing, what gear is on the attacking or defending generals, and so on. And down just below it, you have the debuffs. So when this person, this is in Battlefield, when this person was attacking me, I apply these debuffs onto their troops. And it reduces their attack, the range, ground, mounted siege their attack or their defense or their HP by these amounts, up to a maximum of half of their actual percentage increase. So for example, the ranged troop is increased by 625%, so I can only reduce that by 312.5%. And that's pretty much exactly what I have here. So he kept 0.5%, so it was almost max reduced. That's really how it works here. Now, if I had minus 600%, it really would have been wasted. I would have had too much. But on the other hand, the debuffs for ranged troop and siege troops, the percentages, people can get their attacks into the 1,000 somethings, so very high. So you do want to have very high debuffs, especially for those troops. All right, so that's what it looks like in a battle report. And one of the bigger areas where I was mentioning the misunderstandings happens to do with skill books and just the general skills that the debuff generals would have. Notice that this guy here, he's the mayor of one of my subordinate cities. He doesn't have any skill books whatsoever. The reason he doesn't have any additional skill books is because none of the available player skill books that you can apply have any debuffs. So it's essentially useless. I could put on things like increased construction and troop revival and those kind of things, but I'm not going to waste my time on that. It's only going to have a marginal impact. So I'm not going to spend gems or spend my time really increasing those. What does matter is this one here. Like I said, anything that says reduces something will work. So any reduction, debuff will work. Everything else does not work for your main troops, just reductions. So remember that. In addition to that, you really care about the gear, and this is where most of the debuff percentages come. So I get a little bit here, for example, the 20% reduction in ranged troop attack, but I also get a lot from the gear itself. So you're looking to gear your subordinate cities, your subordinate city mayor generals, with Ecumenian, how do you say that? Ecumenidae? I don't know. You want these kind of equipments, and also Ares. Ares can provide debuff as well. But Aches are usually what you're going to use for gearing up your subordinate city generals. Just looking at some of this gear, you'll notice that I haven't really done a whole lot of refining either. And I believe I have that on my next slide here. So gearing up your subordinate city general, you do not want to worry about refines. Your refines increase your attack and defense and all that. But again, that only works for the troops in the subordinate city itself. It doesn't apply to your main troops. You only care about the debuffs, such as enemy ground troop HP minus 40%, enemy ranged troop HP minus 40%. That matters. The rest of it doesn't matter at all. I don't even care about the siege machine attack, in-city ground troop defense. I don't care about those. I only care about the reductions for my subordinate city general. What else can I tell you here? Obviously, you want to, after you get the gear, you want to make sure it's max star because that'll increase the percentages here. And, okay, that's about it for this piece. Now, what many of you have asked in some of the comments that I've received, or that other people have asked in other methods, is where do I get my subordinate cities, or the generals for my subordinate cities? What should I pick up? And really a lot of good ones are available in the tavern. So as you're collecting your Queen Jindioks or your Baybars or anybody else that you're trying to get in there, try to pick these guys up too, so that you can have enough to fill out your subordinate cities. Even if they're not necessarily used at the time, what you could do is you can have extras and level them up as they're in your subordinate city, and then just exchange them out. And that way you'll have some excess generals to put in as duty officers for some of these buildings later. So the ones that you want to look for, well, I have them listed here. There's two different colors. I have yellow colored ones and green colored ones. You mostly want to get the green colored ones, the Empress and Andrew Jackson. And the reason I say to get these ones are, well, Andrew Jackson doesn't have the biggest percentage number of a decrease of any of these generals, but it is the most targeted. Many players focus on ranged troop attack, and they have really high attacks like, I don't know, I've seen 1200, around there, 1300. There's really high attacks, and you need to be able to reduce the percentage that they can deal to you as much as possible. He is one of the only sources of reduction of enemy troop attacks. And I'm talking about generals, and I'm talking about gear. There are very few options to reduce enemy ranged troop attack. Some of the other options are like the ring you can get to reduce the percentage, but there's really not a whole lot. Range, really need to put a focus on reducing ranged troop attack. So he is essential. I would say get as many of him as you can because he's just that valuable. So if you come across him, definitely pick him up. Let's see, what else? I said the Empress, and she's over here in other, I'm pretty sure. She's great because she reduces enemy troop defense by 15%. That means every type of troop, siege, cavalry, ground, archers, they're all reduced by 15% defense. And the enemy ground troop is reduced by another 15%. So she's pretty decent overall. So if you see any of those two, they're definitely worth picking up. Flavius I put on here as a yellow, and I put him there because I think people were just gifted with him. So you probably already have him, and he's not horrible. Reducing enemy siege machine attack by 20%. That's decent. Siege is a source of a lot of damage. I would definitely prefer the Empress or Andrew Jackson over him, but you can put him in there and he's going to be okay. The only reason he might be a little bit less valuable is there are a lot of sources to reduce enemy siege machine attack. There are a lot of pieces of gear that will do this. So you probably will have an easier time reducing siege machine attack, which makes him a little bit less valuable. Nero used to be pretty decent. He's not horrible, but HP is not usually the biggest factor in PvP that you need to reduce. Generally, it's defense or mostly attack. So, pick them up if you have nothing else, but I wouldn't focus on just trying to find a bunch of Neros. And Gustavus is decent to pick up as well if you have no other options. He reduces enemy ranged troop and siege machine defense by 15%. So again, defenses and HP are not the primary things you want to work on reducing, but they're good to reduce for sure. So Gustavus is another option. And all these guys are available in the tavern, the ones that I picked out here. So you can just pick them out with, just farming with the recruit. Whoops, I clicked the wrong button. So just recruit, refreshing and all that, and you can collect those fairly easily. Other than that, I think I've covered most of what I wanted to talk about today with subordinate cities. The only other thing I could maybe direct you to is where to look at getting gear. So you're looking to pick up these pieces of gear at the end, the aches, and possibly if you already have some dragon pieces, maybe boots or legs, you might consider increasing those and upgrading them to get the Ares ones, because sometimes they do have reductions as well. None of these ones. Let me give you an example. Some of them do, not all of them. But Ares are pretty good for PvP as well, generally. So here's an example. Ranged Ares armor. I'm a little lazy, so I don't have my wonder, which is kind of annoying. I probably should do that, but that is a great piece. For example, it's one of the other few pieces that has ranged troop attack, so these are definitely worth getting if you are able to. What else? That's about it. So if you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I pop in every couple days, or I try to every other day, to answer your comments if you have any questions. You can also send me private messages and stuff too, and I'm pretty good about responding to those, but I prefer if you do it as a comment on the channel because other people might have the same question. Please like, share, subscribe, that kind of thing to get more of this information out, and make sure to share it with your friends so that they are able to access this information too.